Hey guys, Marslingan here, bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so we're continuing with the guides for the 10 new stages of Super Battle Road that are coming to JP, and next up we have Inhuman Deeds. So this one is going to be interesting, because currently the only full leader for this, with the actual leader skill, there is no sub-leader either, like a free-to-play version or anything like that, is a summonable LR, which is the LR, Nappa, and Vegeta. So if you don't have them, it's going to be very tricky to put this kind of team together. So yeah, there's going to be some other options. There's a lot of LRs on this team and a lot of units who are really good in Super Battle Road, but the problem is going to be how you pull them all together, especially if you don't have the Nappa and Vegeta. But we'll go ahead and see what we can do. As always, I'll give my top picks and some honourable mentions, so make sure you let me know any units that you think I missed that we should have gone into more detail down below in the comments section. So smash like if you find the guide helpful, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's go ahead and jump in. So obviously we have the LR, Nappa and Vegeta. They are the category leader, 4 key and 132 stats. Even if you are running some sort of other version of the team, they're probably going to be the best friend to bring if you can actually find one. Because of course they do have an AoE super attack, which is of course super useful for Super Battle Road. They do also raise their defense on the super, so they can tank reasonably well. And then of course, if you want to go for the 18 key super, it's a single target that does a lot more damage, so that can be helpful when there's only one enemy left. Or, you know, even if you've got like 2 enemies left and one of them stun locked, you can use the 18 key super to quickly dispatch the other one. So they get a pretty nice buff when they dodge an attack, and that can kind of mainly come into play with the active skill, because obviously if you have them at 55%, they're not going to be able to dodge at all from the hidden potential system. They do get extra attack and defense at the start of the turn per enemy, so obviously if you're going into a 5-person fight, they do get a nice little buff. And then the active skill, it debuffs their attack, so attack minus 50%, but you get guaranteed dodges for 1 turn, and you can activate this on turn 3. There's no other restriction. So again, in Super Battle Road, where there's like, if you get a fight on this particular stage where there's like 5 enemies, you can use this on turn 3 to get guaranteed dodge. And whilst it does debuff your attack, you're still going to be able to hit an AoE and potentially do a decent amount of damage. Plus, depending where all the attacks are based, as long as there is an attack in slot 1, they're going to get that guaranteed dodge, and then it's going to give them the attack 78%, which kind of offsets the attack minus 50% a little bit. So that is going to help out. And then of course, if you get to the 4th turn and you're on 50% HP or less, you will exchange with the Vegeta. As far as I know, you can't choose not to do it. Funnily enough, this is one of the only LRs I don't have, so I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but it's I think it's can you choose to do it? Exchange, I think you always can. I'm not actually entirely sure. Let me know down below in the comments. I'm not sure if you can or not. I've actually completely forgotten now that I think about it. But so if you transfer over to Vegeta, you no longer have an AoE super, but you lower attack on the 12 key, which is very useful, whilst also raising your attack and defense, and then you greatly raise both of them on the 18 key super, mega colossal damage. Lowering defense isn't that important, but you know, you get to do a nice bit of damage, and you do recover 50% HP, so this could be very useful in Super Battle Road for getting a nice heal. He's self-sufficient with some ki, and then you get extra ki and attack and defense when there's only 1 enemy, or additional ki and attack and defense 18% when attacking super class enemies. So again, it's going to depend on what enemies you fight in this particular stage. And you also get attacks effective against all types when ki is 24. So the transformation into Vegeta, if it is an active skill that you can choose to use, is really best to use either as a heal or as like a finishing blow on the final enemy. So but yeah, they are the main leader. If you don't have them, you're going to have to try out some other options. But as we said at the beginning, this team has a lot of LRs and very powerful units. So The Str Broly is on here. We've mentioned him in some of the other guides already if you've seen them. He is an insanely powerful unit. He obviously gets extra buffs if you're fighting Pure Saiyans or Hybrid Saiyans, and then is effective against all types if it's a Goku family. So that part is contingent on who the enemies are going to be for this stage. But even without those buffs, he's still ridiculously good. Like, you wouldn't not run him just because there's no Pure or Hybrid Saiyan enemies. But considering that Inhuman Deeds is like an extreme unit category, and they do often try and theme the enemies you fight based around the team, I think it's very likely that all of the enemies are going to be super types, and so most of them are probably going to end up being Pure or Hybrid Saiyans, and obviously Goku family slotted in there as well. So Broly is going to be very, very effective. And of course, his best link partner, the Tech LR Broly, in Super Battle Road gets guaranteed additional super attacks. On turn 4, transforms into Legendary Super Saiyan Broly and has an active skill you can use straight away to get guaranteed 24 ki and a big bonus to attack. So he can dish out a ton of damage. He really does hit some ridiculous numbers, even with a low number of dupes. So he's a massive powerhouse. He's just not super good defensively. So you do have to be careful about him potentially taking a whole bunch of attacks. But he definitely is going to be very useful in this stage. So then we have the new LR Super 17. My boy, he is a little bit wonky in his design for sure, but he can be very good on this team. There are a few units on Inhuman Deeds that are in the target Goku category. There's not a ton of other androids, but obviously on JP with the same name update, you can run the Agl Super 17, who we will talk about as well. They can't link together, but they definitely will work very well on the same team. Depending on your dupe levels, the Agl one probably is better than the LR, especially because he can build up his defense very quickly and is very good in slot 1. But this guy is super good as well. Once you've received 7 attacks, he has the active skill that can deal a decent amount of damage. Obviously in Super Battle Road, if this stage is going to have fights where there's like 4 or 5 enemies, getting attacked 7 times is not going to be super difficult. So he's probably on the lower end of the scale of the LRs in this category, especially because he's brand new, so it's unlikely that some people even have him at all, let alone have him with multiple dupes. But he is definitely going to be effective. Then we have the Int Rose. So Int Rose is a very powerful unit. He does need to super attack really first in order to be strong defensively in Super Battle Road, but he's able to hit some pretty crazy numbers. If you're able to finish off enemies with him, he does build up extra ki, and he does give you a little bit of HP regen at the end of the turn if he was attacked. So he just has quite a lot of useful abilities spread out across the board. Unfortunately, unlike a lot of the other Roses, he doesn't have any sort of support for the team, but he's just a very strong single target hitter. And if you do manage to get to the 6th turn somehow, and you're at 66% or less HP, he does have the Rage mode, so that's probably just going to be a finisher, because turn 6 is probably going to be the last stage. Although, to be fair, saying that, if you are running the double Nappa and Vegeta leads, you are running a much lower leader skill than a normal 170 category team, so chances are you may get more turns into the event in this particular stage, so that's something to bear in mind as well. So next up, we have the Prime Battle Freezer, one of the best free-to-play units in the game. He is insanely strong. He's most effective in slot 1 or 3. So in Super Battle Road, while his defense is pretty decent, he's not really the ideal tanking unit. So I think on this team, depending on who else you bring, because obviously he'll link up super well with other Freezers, he's probably going to be best in slot 3. Obviously, if you're attacking a bunch of super class enemies, which I assume this stage will be, he's going to get extra ki, so it's a lot easier to get his 18 ki super, and he's just going to be able to dish out a ton of damage, so he is a very strong free-to-play option. Then we have the AGL Final Form Freezer. So his defense is definitely not the best, that is for sure. But when you're facing multiple enemies, he gets a nice attack and defensive buff and pretty much auto super attacks. And he does AoE super. And he has a chance to seal all of the enemies that he hits, which is actually quite useful. And then if you're only facing one enemy, he gets a much bigger attack buff and has a high chance to stun, which can be very useful because when there's only one enemy left, being able to stun them for that turn is very good. So, I mean, he's going to be most effective if you're using other Freezer units because of his links, but, I mean, he does have big bad bosses, Shocking Speed, Fierce Battle, so he will link up fairly well with some of the other units on the team that aren't Freezer, but Just be careful with his defense, because his defense is not great. He's not a unit that you can put in front of a whole bunch of attacks, but he can be very useful just for dishing out damage to everyone with the AoE, and of course the potential seals. If you get good RNG, you could literally seal everyone with his super attack, which if you were able to do that on like turn 1, that's going to be super good for you for establishing a good foothold in that stage, because you don't have to worry about super attacks for the first 2 turns. So very good. Then next up we have the Agl Super 17. We did mention him briefly when we talked about the tech one. He's just a very solid option. He has 40% damage reduction. He builds up attack and ki and extra damage reduction with each attack he receives. He gives target Goku allies a chance to crit, so that will include the LR and some of the Freezer units, so that can be very strong. He definitely is a solid unit. I would recommend bringing him on the team, especially like if you don't have the LR. If you do have the LR, but depending on how you want to build the team, you only have to pick one of the 2. I think just because this guy's been out longer, so the chances of you having him with dupes and like link leveled and stuff is probably higher. So he probably is a little bit better. Obviously, if you're Crazy Whale and you have both of them rainbowed, then the LR potentially is more effective. But you can bring both, of course. So both of them are going to be very good on this team. So next up we have the Str Rose. Now the main reason I included him is he's kind of outdated now. His defense is definitely not great. He literally just has the 50% defense that he gives to all allies alongside 3 ki. He does debuff superclass enemies attack by 20%, so again, if you're fighting superclass enemies all the way through this, it's nice to have a little bit of passive attack lowering. He does immense damage. The reason I kind of included him here is if you're really lacking a leader, he is a 120 lead for extreme types as long as you bring a unit of each type on the team. So I feel like he's kind of like a last resort maybe as a leader. I don't know, if you have the Nappa and Vegeta and you have a ton of these LRs, you're maybe not going to bring him on the team. But I mean, he is providing ki and defense, so he can be useful. You just have to be very careful because defensively he's not going to be very good. And then we can kind of say the same thing about the Agl one. His leader skill is much worse, so it's only 4 ki and 80%. But technically he is the better unit because he has his Easy A now. So he does greatly raise defense on Super. He gives all extreme allies 3 ki and 30% attack. And then he builds up his defense with each attack received. So I guess one of the best ways to build him up, if you are going to use him on the team as a support, or if you really have to use him as a leader as the last resort, you're probably going to want to use like an Icarus or a Whis and then just let him get hit a few times so he can build up that defense, and then that makes him stronger on the following turns when you maybe don't have an item active. He's going to be able to defend a little bit better. But both of the Rosés, the non-LR ones, are not necessarily top picks, but they do have a leader skill that you can use, and they are providing support to the rest of the team, which includes ki, which is obviously super good for the number of LRs that you can run on this team. So then we have the Agl Golden Freezer. I could have included the tech one as well because they're pretty much interchangeable in Super Battle Road. As long as you stay above the HP restriction, they're going to tank all attacks like they were basically nothing. So we don't really need to say much else about them. They're just going to be your main tanking unit. You just have to be very careful with your HP and make sure that you're not starting the turn below the restriction, because then they cannot tank hits like whatsoever. The tech one has better links and hits harder early on, because the Agl one infinitely raises attack, so in longer events he will end up being able to hit harder. But in Super Battle Road, the tech one tanks slightly better. The Agl one has a 40% or more HP restriction though, so his is a little bit easier to keep active. So either one is usable. I only brought up the Agl page because they are very similar, but either one is going to be good on this team. And of course they have the Freezer links, so you can put them in slot 1 to tank and then maybe use the Agl Freezer or the physical second form Freezer, who's on here somewhere, that we're going to talk about as like a follow-up AoE unit. So next up we have the Int Broly. So he's only been around on the one banner, but he is very strong. I haven't looked specifically at the crossover, but it may be possible to make a movie bosses / planetary destruction team if you don't have Nappa and Vegeta. I know some of the Freezers are on there, and obviously movie bosses, there's a few on there, but a lot of these units on here are not movie bosses, so you might be able to get that done with his leader skill. But yeah, he's obviously very good. If you're fighting pure or hybrid Saiyans, which I imagine you will be in this stage, he gets a bunch of extra damage reduction after super attacking. He does extra damage, chance to crit, He's obviously potentially going to fire off multiple super attacks, even without dupes because of his built-in chance to additional. And then, of course, if you do manage to get off 4 super attacks fairly quickly, he has the active skill, which gives him an auto super, a big attack buff, and attacks effective against all types. So that's the turn where you really want the RNG to come in and get multiple supers, and then he's going to dish out tons of damage. So then we have this Freezer. So this Freezer is going to be a must include on the team if there are Goku family enemies. If there's a Goku family enemy in every single fight, then I would say this guy, after picking your leader, this is the first unit that you put on the team. Because as long as there's a Goku family enemy, he guards and is a support unit. Whilst guarding, he has 50% damage reduction. So without a Goku family unit, all his passive really does is attack and defense 100%. So you don't really want to use him if there's not a Goku family enemy, but when there is, he's insanely good. And he does also lower attack on Super, which is another thing which is super useful on Super Battle Road. So again, he's a unit that you can put in slot 1 as your tank. On the other rotation, you could have a Golden Freezer in slot 1 as your tank, and then it gives you a nice setup to defend well in slot 1. I would be very surprised if the Inhuman Deeds stage doesn't have multiple Goku family enemies, so I feel like this guy is going to be very, very good. So then we have Bojack. So Bojack is on the category. There's not a huge amount of crossover with Space Traveling Warriors and Time Travelers, but I think you might be able to make a team with him as the lead. So that's something to bear in mind. He's a support unit for Space Traveling Warriors, so depending on the crossover that there is there, he can be kind of useful as a support. But when you're facing multiple enemies, he obviously gives even more support. He's pretty okay in his base form. And then once you get to turn 4, you can transform into the full power Bojack, where he's just very powerful, dishes out a ton of damage, can launch an additional super even without dupes, and then the more orbs you pick up, the more extra attack and defense he gets. So he can be very, very good on this team, absolutely, if you have him. Again, it might be possible to make a team using him as a leader, but he's going to be very solid on the team, even if that's not how you're using him. So then we have the Omega Shenron. So STR Omega Shenron, unfortunately his EZA, I don't want to say is outdated now, but like he's not super good in some of the harder content because he completely revolves around lowering the enemy's attack. But that is something that is very, very useful in Super Battle Road. So he's lowering all the enemies' attack by 40%. He also is a full power support unit if you have crossover there in your team. And obviously he has solid links like Brill Beatdown, Fear and Faith, Big Bad Bosses, Shock and Speed, Fierce Battle. So he has good links and he's nerfing the enemy. You probably want to use him as a 3rd slot floating unit, but whenever he's on rotation, he is going to be nerfing the enemy and allowing you to take a lot less damage. So very, very good. Then we have the physical 2nd form Freezer. So he's another AoE unit. He's a free-to-play option, but he's very good. With the link level update, if you have him linked up with another Freezer unit, the strongest clan in Space Link at level 10 debuffs the enemy's defense, and when the enemy has their defense debuffed, he gets a bunch of extra attack, so he's going to be much more powerful. The only downside is, just like the AGL Final Form Freezer, his defense isn't the best. So he's going to be good for dishing out a ton of damage, but he's not going to be the best for something like a no items attempt. You definitely want items active if he's going to be taking a bunch of attacks on that turn, because he can't stun or seal or anything like that. He just AoEs. He does have an active skill, can be activated when there's 3 or more enemies starting from the 3rd turn. So obviously this relies on there being 3 or more enemies and there still being 3 or more left on the 3rd turn, because if you're fighting like 3 enemies, it's very possible that you'll have just killed one of them by the time you get to the 3rd turn. But if you do have it, you can activate it and it basically just does a bunch of extra damage and greatly lowers attack and defense. So depending on how the turn's played out, if there's a unit in slot 1 attacking you multiple times, you can use the active skill on them, and even if it doesn't finish them off, it greatly lowers their attack, so it's going to be very useful. So yeah, those are my top picks and honourable mentions for Inhuman Deeds. LR Baby's pretty good. He's a little bit outdated now. He's not the best in Super Battle Road, but the Golden Ape transformation can be pretty useful. LR Full Power Freezer is actually very powerful, especially if you're running other Freezer units, but you have to be careful because he does sacrifice HP on one of his super attacks. The 16-bit Vegeta is okay, but not the best in Super Battle Road. I guess this Freezer can be a good substitute leader because he has the Extreme Types 120 lead, but he's not the best unit himself for Super Battle Road, so that's something you would have to bear in mind. And obviously, if you are fighting a bunch of Goku family enemies, the Scout of Vegeta can be pretty good as well. So that is going to be it for my top picks and honorable mentions. Like I said at the beginning, if you think there's anyone I missed or we should have talked about more, let me know down below. Obviously, this one is going to be a lot more awkward because the main proper leader is a summonable LR that a lot of people are not necessarily going to have, so you might have to get a bit more creative with your team build. So let us know down below in the comments who you are planning to use for your team for this one. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Master Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new, check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.